Hello everybody, welcome to ComedIan MTG, my name is Ian. This weekend the Discord server Commander's Vault held a cEDH tournament and I'm here breaking down the top 4 of that tournament today. For those of you who haven't heard of the Commander's Vault, one, I'll leave the link in the description down below, but the Commander's Vault is a really cool play space for EDH on all power levels. So they have mid to low power level focus in certain channels, but you can also sign up to be playing cEDH on that server. It started out as a cultivated play space between friends and then kind of grew into something more, so check out the Commander's Vault, and sometimes they do really cool things like have cEDH tournaments. Let's get into the decks from today's tournament. So today's tournament's especially awesome for me because I had 2 of the decks that I've written primers for show up in this top 4, so it's really cool to see people piloting the decks that I've worked really hard on. One of them is my exact list, and then one of them has some slight edits, and we'll talk about that. The first person in this top 4 is Mr. Bruce featuring Winota snowball stacks. Now I did the compare feature on Moxfield ahead of time. This is the exact 99 that I use for Winota, and it's the exact one on the primary list. Mr. Bruce has been absolutely killing it lately with Winota. He just won the Playing with Power cEDH webcam tournament too, and now top 4'd this event this weekend. So he's been doing really well with this deck, and I just think it's gotten so many new powerful tools lately. Now, Midnight Hunt was legal for this event, but there were no changes to the primer for Midnight Hunt. There's one card, Brutal Cathar, that we're thinking about playing, but it wasn't in the deck list, and I'm still not sure it actually makes the cut. But Winota Snowball Stacks, for those who don't know, is a deck that features Winota and uses her ability to flip cards off the top of her library to basically break parity on mana and card advantage. Winota is paralleled by none with the value that she can generate out of the command zone, and the only reason that she's not like a S tier deck is because she's locked into the Boros colors. But a Boros commander being in the B to A tier, putting up frequent results in tournaments is pretty huge. So Winota's a very strong list, looking to win by either A, beating opponents down, which used to not be a realistic mode of winning the game, but with cards like Blade Historian, that process has gotten a lot easier. Other options like Rick's Steadfast Leader helped putting a ton of pressure on the table. And then the combos have become even more efficient as time goes on. Now, originally the deck was only on Kiki Jiki / Splinter Twin combos, but luckily Rionia Fire Dancer has come out, and that actually layers really well with Combat Celebrant because it's a human exclusive combo, meaning Winota can actually flip the entire combo off the top of the library. Now, technically speaking, that could have been done before because Mogcatcher allows you to go get Kiki, and often that is how I win many a game, is Mogcatchering into a Kiki Jiki. But as I said, those who know the primer list of Winota will know this list. Congrats to Mr. Bruce for putting up another great performance with this deck. Winota's been on kind of a tear lately, top 16ing tier 1 con, winning the Playing with Power tournament, top 4ing here. It's a pretty good time to be a Winota pilot. Our next player is Vertov64 with Dawnwaker Thrasios. So for those who don't know, Dawnwaker Thrasios was my first primer on the cEDH decklist database. It is a deck that has gone through many evolutions, many different skins, many different win con packages, but the main combo of the deck always remains to be Zerda the Dawnwaker and Grim and Basalt Monolith, which kind of keeps it separate from other Thrasios Bruce options. The deck also runs Dockside Extortionist combos, which are often a very frequent win con, as Emil and Dockside is an extremely efficient combo in these colors. The one main difference between Vertov's list and my own is, as you can see at the top, this is Dawnwaker Thrasios. So while the primer list right now is actually using Derevi, Emil, Gaia's Cradle lines, what Vertov has decided is to add Sanctum Weaver, Fabro Elder, and keep the Bloom Tender in, but also play free from the reel. Now, the idea is basically that we want one win condition that is not affected by Collector Oof, Stony Silence, etc. And while the primer list I've chosen to go with the Derevi Cradle lines, the Freed from the Reel lines are also very powerful, and obviously you get access to some really strong mana dorks there. I have found them to be a little too slow for my personal taste, but it's still really strong. And I noticed that Vertov is also on Power Artifact and Sterling Grove. Power Artifact being a way to once again combo off of the monoliths. It's currently in the considering board for Dawnwaker Thrasios, the primer version, and Sterling Grove, obviously a lot better when you want to be fetching up these enchantments like Fruit from the Real Power Artifact. I don't know if I'm a huge fan of Sterling Grove as the option. I feel like something like Open the Armory might just do better, but apart from that, doing the normal Dawnwaker Thrasios things, wanting to get your Thrasios out, grind some advantage engines, maybe Neoform your Bruce Tarl into a Seedborn Muse, which is kind of the main engine of the deck, grind a lot of value, win with one of these infinite mana combos, and take the game from there. I've actually seen Dawnwaker do like pretty decently at a couple tournaments before and missing out in the top 16, but it's nice to have a top 4 performance from a deck that I've really been passionate about for over a year now. Here is a frequent name you may be used to hearing, and one hell of a spicy deck. We are showing off Spleen Faces, and if you don't love me now, this is a Chainer Nightmare Adept deck. I have been looking at this thing for a bit, and there's many definitely unique choices in here. I definitely have asked Spleen about a couple of them, so if I have any updates on some answers to these questions, I will throw them down in the comments below this video. But this list is super spicy. It's just like classic what people would think of as Reanimator, not just like, oh, I'm only playing 2 Reanimator threats in my deck. This just feels like a traditional Reanimator list, and it's super cool. Running a lot of interesting creatures. I just asked Spleen about why he's on Grim Initiate, not really sure about that one. Mog Fanatic feels like a combo piece, I'm pretty sure, with Necrotic Ooze. I'm not sure what the combo is there, but there's a combo definitely. This deck is super cool. It's running Villas and Razaketh, normal reanimation targets. We have Sire of Insanity, which if you're playing like a Rakdos Reanimator list, it seems like a pretty good option here. Inferno Titan, which I haven't seen in a while, and I kind of like it as an option fighting against decks that are slower and more of a mid-range value kind of metas. I think it's really good if you're playing in a dork heavy meta, and I know Spleen plays in metas sometimes that tend to be more into the mid-range value side of the format, so that's really cool. Something about this tournament I noticed when registering for it, because I did participate in this tournament but dropped out day 2 because I wanted to enjoy some pre-releasing. I noticed that this tournament had a lot of people signing up with mid-range options as their picks for the tournament, and I think it's pretty interesting that a deck that like clearly has a lot of anti-mid-range options did pretty well here. We have Kaldheim's Burning Rune Demon, also a great card for when you're doing Reanimator type stuff, dumping a bunch of stuff in the graveyard, getting you card advantage. This just seems like a super cool list. The presence of Kiki Jiki and Zealous Conscripts shows a win con there. Necrotic Ooze is definitely, seems like this might be one of the more fair Necrotic Ooze decks, and I'm interested to see how this deck really takes advantage of it. But if you look at a lot of these creatures we've already talked about, like there are activated abilities. We have Razaketh, which Necrotic Ooze on the battlefield and then like pass, it will definitely put people on alert, but then there's definitely a world where you can do some politicking where you're like, okay, I have a Necrotic Ooze, like, and people assume that Necrotic Ooze is just like a bad pile card, like you messed up something with your Hermit Druid or something. So if you play a Necrotic Ooze out and hard cast it, which I heard that this did happen during one or more of the games in this tournament with this deck, the idea that you can play a Necrotic Ooze and if you entomb a Razaketh, suddenly that's just like, you don't have to do anything else. The Necrotic Ooze is already on the battlefield. One, it dodges a lot of counters that we commonly play in the format. And two, like it's basically the equivalent of reanimating that Razaketh without actually having to go through casting a reanimation spell. So Necrotic Ooze is really cool here. Some picks that may come off as a little strange, cards like Doom Necromancer just work really, really well with Chainer because you get to give them haste so they can discard, cast basically the Doom Necromancer, use that to reanimate something, and then just kind of keep that loop going, which is really, really strong. And when you're using the Doom Necromancer, you're paying 4 for any of these giant threats in your yard, as opposed to, you know, like 8 for Villas or 8 for Razaketh or 6 for Sire of Insanity, Inferno Titan, etc., etc. One pick that I really like in this deck is Possibility Storm, because the way Chainer works is that it dumps the cards into your graveyard as part of your cost. So if you're casting cards out of your graveyard, you're actually not triggering Possibility Storm, because Possibility Storm only triggers when you cast a spell from their hand. So that's really cool stuff. So you can basically break parity on Possibility Storm because you cast your commander and then all of your creatures become castable at that point. That's like a super cool synergy. I'm a big fan of that. The deck also features dual caster Heat Shimmer combo, which is just another classic win condition. So it's got some really interesting stuff. I'm a big fan of using Heat Shimmer instead of Twin Flame, because I've noticed a lot of people will play Twin Flame and not have a lot of things that they can double on their own side of the field, whereas Heat Shimmer can do things like grab your opponent's dock side, or make a copy of a very scary creature on the board. I'm a fan of using Heat Shimmer instead. This deck is super sweet. I think it's really cool. I definitely would love to get Spleen's opinions on some of these choices at some point, and I can make some sort of follow-up with that. But this list is super cool. Spleenface bringing the spice today, making the top 4, and bringing a very cool list. And the last list today was from our winner, Archlord 5, Minsc Minced Garlic. This is a Minced Beloved Ranger Protean Hulk deck. The idea is that Minsk is a Protean Hulk sacrifice outlet, basically, with some addendum there, because you can target any of your creatures at sorcery speed and activate Minsk's ability and make them 0/0s, which will basically be a sacrifice outlet. This deck's really cool. It's not the version on the Brewer's Corner right now. This is Archlord's own version of the list, but it is a classic Protean Hulk list running Boonweaver Giant as well, which is pretty cool. The idea is that you get Protean Hulk, you sacrifice it or make it have 0 toughness because of Minsk's ability, and then go through a Hulk pile. A lot of the piles that I've seen involve, actually the one that was featured at the end there, at the end of the game, was Mist Moon Griffin and Grand Abolisher. And basically Mist Moon Griffin allows you to get your Protean Hulk back, so you get that, and then having Grand Abolisher there means that no one can do any sort of funny business while the Hulk line is going off. And then from there you can do a couple of things. There's different ways to layer it. There's things with Karmic Guide, there's Kiki Jiki, stuff like that. But the way that I see the pilots most often going for it is getting Safi Eric's daughter and Gerard, Weatherlight Hero. And basically the way that that works out is that you can create piles where you are infinitely recurring your Protean Hulk, getting all those cards out of your library, and then you create like infinite reanimator loops. And when that happens, you get a Mog Fanatic out of your deck. And then so part of this infinite reanimator loop is that you are getting the Mog Fanatic back, pinging your opponent once, doing that loop again, and eventually you ping your opponents until they have no health left. It's a little convoluted, but there are really great ways to go through the loop outlined in the primer. I was doing a bit of brewing with Minsk when the card first came out, and I'm not a huge fan of the way the card is set up, just given the fact that, well, first of all, a lot of people are trying to push it as like the fastest Protean Hulk deck, which I'm quite surprised that that's the angle they're sort of taking on it when we have a green-black version. So that's pretty interesting. Well, I can see cards like Orcish Lumberjack, cards like Bloom Tender don't scream to me like this is the fastest deck around. Or Faber Elder, even more explicitly so. But it's got a lot of really cool layering. It's got a lot of really cool interactions in the deck. The ability to break parity on stacks being played right now is really powerful in their format. I'm very interested because Minsk was sort of pitched as like the stacks version of a Protean Hulk deck, and I'm seeing like no stacks in this entire deck. So that's pretty interesting to me. It's on like Birthing Pod, so it can go up the Birthing Pod lines with Felidar Guardian, Kiki Jiki, etc. That's some pretty cool layering that they have there in this list. And then it has obviously all the combos we talked about with like Pattern of Rebirth, Boonweaver Hulk, etc, etc. So it's more of a Naya aggro Hulk deck, like much closer to Viral's than I would have anticipated from a deck like this. And it's pretty hard to disrupt, and I get that part of it. That's definitely like a solid appeal. And by that I mean like cards like Allosaurus Shepherd really help stuff like that. Destiny Spinner makes your stuff uncounterable. So from a on the stack interaction standpoint, it's pretty hard to disrupt. The Protean Hulk pieces can be pretty clunky, but as I mentioned with that Grand Abolisher pile, as soon as Abolisher, so basically as soon as the Protean Hulk trigger resolves, there's no more interaction that your opponents can do out of there. So it really helps to mitigate the downside of of having Minsk as your sack outlet, because Minsk is very easy to mess with, especially given the fact that it makes it much worse that the ability is sorcery speed. I think it's pretty rough in general. I get why for like balance perspectives they had to make the card like this, but if I'm playing a Protean Hulk deck, I feel like the ability to sacrifice my stuff at any time is really huge. Weird niche cases come out where you go to like sacrifice one of your creatures and instead your opponents can like cast a Chain of Vapor and bounce it to your hand, and unlike with sack outlet, the sacrifice doesn't happen already. If Minsk was an instant speed ability, you would just be able to stack it on top of it, but that's not how Minsk works, which is kind of unfortunate for the deck. However, all that being said, it seems like a really consistent and strong deck, and despite the downside of Minsk being a 3-color Turbo Protean Hulk deck with Birthing Pod layering and stuff like that, seems to have really paid off today. So congrats to Arclord 5 on this deck. I think the deck's super interesting. It's definitely really exciting to see a deck that is very atypical when we talk about like what's being played currently in cEDH. It's really nice to have a deck that is not something that is typical and that is not something that you normally seeing play here. And it's a very exciting time to be a cEDH player with such an open meta, with a lot of brews going on. It's really cool to have this tournament where the top 4 was not the standard decks that are available in this field. But I think it shows that the people in cEDH can come with really powerful decks and have them perform well, and that they don't have to be the same stuff you're seeing all the time. It's really exciting to see this tournament, really exciting that Commander's Vault was able to put this on. It was a free to enter tournament with real prizes on the line. Super awesome to participate in it when I was doing that the first day, and it is really cool. So thank you to everyone at Commander's Vault for putting this tournament on. Congratulations to our top 4, specifically Arclord 5 for winning the whole thing. And if you're watching this at home and you're like, man, I love these top 4 breakdowns, I would like to see more of them, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Liking helps the algorithm a ton and lets these videos get seen, and subscribing lets you know whenever we do videos like this. And with the amount of tournaments that are starting to happen in the cEDH sphere, these are more and more, and I'm so excited because they're one of my favorite things to do. It's super cool to have 2 of the lists I've worked on so hard make a solid showing in this tournament and see such a variety of really unique and powerful decks at this field. All right, everybody. Hope you guys have an amazing week, and I will see you next time. Peace.